My son told me not to come for Christmas. He said, "We've got plans with my wife's family. You wouldn't fit in." What he didn't say? That for 8 years, I'd been secretly paying the mortgage on the house where his perfect little holiday would take place. No thank you, no call, just silence. So this year, I decided to give him the gift he never expected. The kind of silence that echoes in foreclosure notices. If you've ever felt cast aside by the very people you sacrificed for, this story is for you. Hit like if you've been there. Leave a comment if you've had enough of being taken for granted. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories like this. Linda hadn't always been alone on Christmas. There was a time, years ago, when laughter filled her modest home. When her husband, Carl, would string up mismatched lights around the porch, and her son Jason would groan dramatically, pretending to hate the holiday songs blaring from the radio. Back then, their little family had traditions. Linda's famous cinnamon rolls in the morning, a walk through the snowy neighborhood in the afternoon, and a fire burning late into the night. They didn't have much, but what they had was warmth. Then Carl got sick. It started with fatigue, then hospital visits, then treatments, and within a year, he was gone. Just like that. The house, the holidays, even the cinnamon rolls, they all felt emptier without him. But Linda stayed strong, especially for Jason. He was in college when Carl passed, and she didn't want to burden him with the weight of grief or finances. So she carried it alone. She picked up part-time bookkeeping jobs. She tightened every corner of her budget. And when Jason and his wife, Emily, bought their starter home a few years later, Linda quietly offered to help. She never said how much she contributed, just that she had some savings and would be happy to support them. What Jason never knew was that Linda had taken on the mortgage herself, her name on the papers, her bank account making the payments, month after month, year after year. Even as inflation rose, even as groceries got more expensive, even as her arthritis flared up and her hours were cut, she kept paying. Because it was for Jason, for her son, for the family. Every Christmas, Linda decorated her small house alone. She still baked the cinnamon rolls. She mailed out cards with hopeful handwriting. And she waited. Waited for Jason to say, "Mom, come over." Sometimes, she was invited for a quick dinner. Other times, she received a polite text. "We're really swamped this year, sorry." Still, she held on to hope. She believed that if she gave enough, loved hard enough, stayed patient long enough, Jason would see. He'd remember the way she held the family together after Carl's death. He'd understand the sacrifices she made, what she gave up so he could have a home, a life, a future. Linda wasn't naive. She just loved deeply, unconditionally. One chilly afternoon in early December, Linda stood in her tiny kitchen, flipping through a catalog of holiday cookie cutters she didn't need but always browsed anyway. The phone rang. It was Jason. Her heart lifted instantly. They chatted briefly, about work, the kids, nothing special. Then, Linda gently asked, "So, what are you and Emily doing for Christmas this year?" There was a pause, a cold one. "Oh," Jason said, "we're spending it with Emily's family. Big thing at her parents' cabin. You know, traditions and all." Linda smiled softly, though the corners of her mouth barely moved. "That sounds lovely," she said. "Yeah, and, Jason cleared his throat. "It's probably better you don't come. There's not really space and it's mostly Emily's side. You understand, right?" She didn't respond right away. Her fingers tightened slightly around the phone. "Sure," she whispered. "I understand." "Cool," he said. "Anyway, gotta run. Merry Christmas, Mom." Click. Linda stared at the screen for a moment. Then she set the phone down, walked to her window, and looked out at the street. The neighborhood kids were building a crooked snowman across the way. A dog barked. Somewhere, Distant carolers were rehearsing. But inside, the silence was deafening. She wasn't angry. Not yet. She wasn't even heartbroken in the dramatic, crying on the floor way. What she felt was worse. The slow, dawning realization that she had become invisible. That her love had turned into something expected, no longer cherished, just consumed. She had given so much of herself, and somewhere along the way, Jason had stopped seeing her as a person. She was just a resource, a silent safety net. The woman who always said yes, who always sent money, who never said no. Until now. That night, Linda didn't cry. She sat at the kitchen table, the same one where she and Carl used to share late-night coffee and quiet jokes. A cinnamon-scented candle flickered in the center, untouched since last year. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her heart, however, was unraveling thread by thread. Jason's voice echoed in her mind. "It's probably better you don't come. You understand, right?" She had said yes. Of course she had. She always did. Because Linda had been trained, by grief, by motherhood, by the aching silence left after Carl's death, to make space for everyone else, even when it meant shrinking herself to nothing. But something inside her shifted. Not with fury, not with bitterness, with clarity. She began to remember the quiet sacrifices, not the dramatic movie-style gestures, but the real ones, skipping dentist appointments to make a mortgage payment, reusing tea bags, denying herself new shoes for 3 winters so Jason's kids could have birthday parties. All the nights she had eaten soup from a can while Jason posted pictures of gourmet takeout. And the most painful part wasn't that she'd done those things. It was that he never noticed. Not once. Not a single "thank you, Mom." Not even a question like, "How are you managing?" Jason simply lived in the comfort she built, as if it had always been there. Linda stood up slowly. She walked to the small bookshelf in the corner of the living room, pulled out a worn red folder. Inside were bank documents, mortgage statements, her signed guarantee papers, the quiet proof of a quiet devotion. She stared at the total, $218,432. That was how much she'd paid toward Jason's home since the day he and Emily couldn't quite swing it on their own. She had never told him the real number. She thought it would embarrass him, or make him feel guilty. She didn't want that. She only wanted to help. But now, she felt foolish. No, used. A few days later, Linda got a card in the mail. It was from Jason and Emily. A standard holiday card, printed from one of those online services. On the front, a photo of Jason, Emily, and their 2 kids in matching flannel pajamas sitting by the fireplace. The caption read, "Home for the holidays, blessed beyond measure." Linda stared at it for a long moment. She turned the card over. No handwritten message, not even her name. Just, "Love, Jason and Emily." She set the card down and walked to her desk. Her hand hovered over the small drawer where she kept stamps, pens, and paper clips. Then she opened a different drawer, the one at the bottom. The one she hadn't touched in years. Inside was a copy of the deed. The house Jason lived in? It wasn't just hers in theory. It was hers on paper. Her name was the primary title holder. Legally, she had every right to change the terms, revoke the agreement, renegotiate, or even, if she wanted, pull out entirely. And for the first time in years, she considered it. Not as revenge, not out of spite, but because something deeper was breaking open inside her, a need to reclaim her dignity. She picked up the phone and called her bank. The woman on the other end was polite, efficient. Linda explained she was reviewing her real estate holdings. Could she have a full summary of the current loan and title status? Yes, of course. It would be emailed by end of day. Next, she called her lawyer. It was a short conversation, just a consultation. No formal action, yet. Linda didn't act rashly. She didn't tell anyone. Not even her sister, not the women in her book club, not the neighbors she sometimes had tea with on Fridays. This was something sacred, something internal, something that didn't need to be broadcasted in order to be real. In the evenings, she began sorting through files, making neat piles, highlighting dates, flagging payments. And every time she received another cheery photo from Jason on social media, his kids laughing with Santa, the tree twinkling with lights, Emily showing off matching stockings, Linda felt less pain and more resolve. Because this wasn't about ruining anyone's holiday. This was about ending the lie. She had been treated like an afterthought, all while propping up the very life that excluded her. And this Christmas, Linda realized something most mothers take too long to learn. Love doesn't mean funding your own erasure. Linda didn't wake up the next morning with a master plan. She woke up early, like she always did, made her tea, fed the birds outside her window, listened to the hum of the world moving without her. But her mind was no longer looping with hurt. It was working, quietly, clearly. She started by pulling out every file related to Jason's house. Over the years, she had meticulously saved everything: contracts, loan updates, payment schedules, bank correspondences. The folder had grown thick, unlike her son's gratitude. As she flipped through the pages, she realized something Jason probably never had. The house was still in her name. Entirely. Years ago, she and Carl had set it up that way to protect family assets. The plan was always for Jason to eventually refinance and take over, but eventually never came. Jason had excuse after excuse. The timing wasn't right, the market was unstable, they were expecting another baby, and Linda, soft-hearted, ever-hopeful Linda, had let it slide. She told herself, "It's temporary. He'll take responsibility soon." He never did, but now she saw that temporary had become a life sentence, for her. She made a call to the bank and requested a stop payment authorization for the next scheduled withdrawal. It took 5 minutes. The woman on the line asked, "Are you sure, ma'am?" Linda replied, without a tremor in her voice, "Yes, I'm done." She didn't tell Jason. Instead, she called her attorney, a no-nonsense woman named Marla she hadn't spoken to in years. "I'm not trying to evict my son," Linda explained. "I'm just reclaiming my limits." Marla understood. Women like them always did. Marla walked her through the process, formally removing herself as payer on the loan, beginning a property reassessment, and, should it come to it, preparing for a foreclosure hearing. Not that Linda wanted to go that far, but she was no longer afraid to put that possibility on the table. After the paperwork was set in motion, Linda did something she hadn't done in over a decade. She bought herself a new winter coat. Not an expensive one, not flashy, just something warm and sturdy, with deep pockets. She wore it out of the store and walked home instead of calling a ride. She felt lighter. Not happy, exactly, but grounded, whole. Meanwhile, Jason went about his December as if nothing had changed. He posted pictures of his kids making gingerbread houses, boasted about Emily's legendary holiday roast, even shared a meme that said, "Shout out to all the moms who make Christmas magical." Linda didn't like or comment. She simply watched and waited. 2 weeks before Christmas, Jason called her. "Hey, Mom, can you send that extra check early this month? We're a little tight with gift shopping." Linda smiled. "I'm not sending anything this month, honey." There was a pause on the other end. Then, "Wait, what? Why?" "I've made some changes," she said calmly. "You'll see." Jason was clearly rattled, but he didn't press. Not yet. He was still in the stage where he believed a little pushback would fix everything. He hadn't realized that something had shifted, that his mother wasn't just pausing a payment. She was drawing a line. Linda hung up and sat in silence. She expected guilt to creep in, regret, fear. Instead, she felt peace. For the first time in years, she was no longer dancing around someone else's comfort. She was standing still, on her own ground. And just a few days later, Jason would receive his first notice from the bank. The holiday spirit, it seemed, had found a new way to arrive this year, wrapped not in ribbon or warmth, but in official paper and cold, printed truth. The notice arrived on a Monday morning. Jason opened the mailbox, expecting Christmas cards, or maybe a late Amazon delivery. Instead, he held a thick envelope from the bank. At first, he thought it was a year-end mortgage summary, until he read the bold print. Final warning, payment delinquency, action required. His stomach turned. He flipped pages rapidly, disbelief rising with every line. Missed payment, lapsed account, risk of default. He grabbed his phone and dialed Linda immediately. "Mom, what the hell is this?" Linda was in her kitchen, watering her peace lily. "Good morning to you too, Jason." "Don't play cute. I just got a foreclosure notice. Why didn't the mortgage get paid?" She set the watering can down and wiped her hands with a dish towel. "Because I stopped paying it." Jason's voice went from sharp to outraged in seconds. "You can't just do that. I thought you said you'd help us until we could take it over." "I said I would help," she replied evenly. "That doesn't mean forever." Jason scoffed. "You gave me no warning. What kind of mother blindsides her own son like this, days before Christmas?" Linda inhaled deeply. The kind who's been treated like a checkbook instead of a parent. Silence. Jason eventually muttered, "So you're just cutting us off?" "I'm drawing a boundary, Jason. There's a difference." He hung up without another word. By midweek, Emily had messaged her too, syrupy at first. "Hi, Linda. Just checking in. Jason seems stressed and we're confused about the mortgage stuff. Hope everything's okay. Let us know if we can help." Linda didn't reply. 2 hours later came another message, this one tighter. "Honestly, this feels cruel. You could have talked to us before taking action. We have kids, you know." That line made Linda pause. Yes, they had kids, and Linda had been feeding those kids indirectly for years. Her name wasn't on birthday cards, but it was behind every light bill and roof tile above their heads. That night, Jason called again. This time, his voice was different. He wasn't angry. He was desperate. "Look, maybe I've taken you for granted, okay? But please, Mom, the house, it's the only stability we have." Linda listened. She really listened. Not just to the words, but to the tone beneath them. Jason wasn't sorry. He was scared. Scared of losing the comfort he thought he owned. Scared of explaining to Emily's parents why their perfect life was unraveling. But regret? Accountability? Still nowhere in sight. "I'm not trying to ruin your life, Jason," she said gently. "I just realized I've been ruining mine by never saying no." "Can't you just make this one last payment?" he begged. "I already did," she replied. "Many times over." Jason was silent. Then came the emotional bait. "I guess I know now how little I matter to you." Linda didn't take it. "I know exactly how much you matter to me. That's why this has gone on as long as it has, but I won't let you confuse love with obligation anymore." The next day, Linda got a letter from the bank confirming the payment hold and her formal request to begin reassessment of the property. Jason, meanwhile, scrambled to pull together partial payments, but the numbers didn't add up. Without Linda, the math turned cold and sharp. And just like that, the illusion shattered. There would be no cozy Christmas by the fire this year. No wine glass clinks under the twinkling lights. Only paperwork, deadlines, and a slowly dawning reality that Mom wasn't going to swoop in this time. She had already done enough. Sometimes the quietest revenge is simply stopping the support they never appreciated. If you think Linda did the right thing, hit that like button. Ever had to walk away from someone who took too much? Share your story in the comments. We're listening. The week before Christmas, Jason showed up at Linda's doorstep. Not a call, not a text, just a knock. Loud, fast, impatient. Linda opened the door slowly. Jason stood there, disheveled, jaw clenched, wearing the same puffer jacket she had bought him 3 winters ago. His eyes darted past her, as if expecting cameras, or maybe witnesses. "We need to talk," he said. Linda stepped aside. "Then come in." He didn't sit. He paced the small living room like a caged animal. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The bank is threatening foreclosure. Emily is furious. The kids don't know what's going on. You're throwing your own family into chaos. For what?" Linda remained quiet, letting him spill. "For what?" he repeated, his voice cracking. "Because I didn't invite you to Christmas? Seriously?" She finally looked at him. "It's not about one Christmas, Jason. It's about every time I gave and you looked away. Every year you forgot who was making your life possible." He shook his head. "You're acting like this is all some grand betrayal. I didn't ask you to pay the mortgage." "No," she said softly. "You never asked. But you never stopped taking either." Jason sat down, elbows on knees, running his hands through his hair. "I thought it was just something you wanted to do. You always said it wasn't a big deal." "Because I thought you'd take over eventually," Linda replied. "I thought you'd want to." His shoulders sagged. Linda stood, walked to her desk, and returned with a folder. She handed it to him. "Here, every payment, every year, my name on the title, proof that I didn't just help, I carried it." He flipped through the documents, the reality hitting harder with each page. There was no escaping it now. This wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was truth in black and white. "You went to a lawyer?" he asked. "I had to protect myself," she said. "And my peace." Jason looked up, eyes reddening. "You're really going to let us lose the house?" Linda's voice didn't rise. "I didn't say that. But if you want to keep it, you'll have to fight for it, without expecting me to fix everything." He stood again, this time slower. "So what? This is your way of teaching me a lesson?" She met his gaze, calm and steady. "No, Jason. This is me finally learning mine." He stared at her like she'd become someone else. But she hadn't. She was still his mother, the same woman who once stayed up all night sewing his Halloween costume, who stood in the rain at every little league game, who paid his mortgage while eating canned soup for dinner. The only difference now was she finally saw herself, and she wasn't going back. It was Christmas Eve when Linda got the text from Emily. "Can you come by? The kids miss you. Let's talk." For a long moment she stared at the screen, unsure if it was a trap or an olive branch. Then she picked up her coat and drove to their house, the house she had kept standing for 10 years. The living room was decorated to perfection. Ornaments shimmered on the tree. Stockings hung neatly on the mantel. It smelled like cinnamon and denial. Jason sat stiffly on the couch. Emily hovered near the kitchen, arms folded. The kids peeked out from the hallway, confused. Linda stood by the entryway, purse still slung over her shoulder. Emily spoke first. "I didn't know. I didn't realize what was going on. Jason told me you were helping with bills sometimes, but I had no idea." "That I was paying your mortgage?" Linda said calmly. Emily's eyes dropped. "Yes." Jason flinched. "Why are you making this a public shaming? This isn't helping anything." Linda stepped further into the room. "You're right. It's not about shaming. It's about clarity. Because for years you let your wife believe I was just the overbearing mom who popped in with a check now and then, but I was the bank, and the backup plan, and the unpaid babysitter." Emily's face flushed with guilt. "You mean all those months when Jason said the mortgage was tight, he wasn't paying it?" Linda looked directly at her. "He never was." Jason exploded. "Okay, fine. I screwed up. I should have said something, but I didn't want you both looking at me like I'm some loser who couldn't take care of his own family." Emily turned toward him. "But that's what you let her be, your crutch. You lied to me, Jason. He stood up, voice rising. I did what I had to do. Linda raised her voice, not in anger, but authority. No, you did what was easiest, and that's over now. The silence that followed was brutal. Even the kids were still. Emily spoke, quiet but firm. You owe her more than an apology. You owe her the truth. Jason didn't respond. His face was red, jaw tight, chest heaving with words he didn't know how to form. Linda turned to the children and softened. I love you both. I always will. But loving someone doesn't mean erasing yourself for them. Your father needs to be better. And I need to stop pretending he doesn't. She turned toward the door. I came to say goodbye, not for drama. I'll be fine, whether you all figure this out or not. As she walked out, Jason didn't stop her. But Emily did. She followed Linda outside, tears in her eyes. I'm sorry. I really didn't know. Please don't disappear. We need you. But more importantly, the kids need to know who you really are. Linda nodded once, quietly moved. For the first time in years, someone in that house had seen her. Not as a walking checkbook, but as the woman who made everything possible. A few days after Christmas, Linda stood on the porch of her small bungalow, sipping tea as the winter sun filtered through the frosted windows. The quiet was no longer deafening. It was peaceful. For the first time in years, no one was calling to ask if she could just cover this month, or watch the kids for an hour. The silence felt like a space she had earned. She had contacted the bank that morning to officially remove herself from the mortgage arrangement. It took a few calls and some stubborn bureaucracy, but she got it done. Jason would now be fully responsible for his family's home, just like he always should have been. That afternoon, he texted her for the first time since Christmas Eve. I get it. I was wrong. I don't blame you for stepping away. Just don't stop loving the kids. She didn't reply. Not out of spite, but because she no longer felt obligated to manage his emotions. Love didn't require sacrifice without recognition, and boundaries weren't betrayal. They were protection. Instead, she texted Emily. The kids are always welcome at my house, anytime. But this has to be separate from your marriage. I won't be part of your safety net anymore. Only your family if you want me. Emily responded within minutes. I understand. And yes, we want you. I want you. As you are. Linda sat with those words for a long time. They felt new, unfamiliar, honest. In the days that followed, she began reclaiming her time. She joined a local book club, picked up painting again, a hobby she'd dropped when Jason was still a toddler. She reconnected with two old friends from college she hadn't seen in years. She even booked a solo weekend trip to Santa Fe for spring. Her life no longer revolved around someone else's emergencies. She had always thought motherhood meant being endlessly available, but now she understood that showing up for someone didn't mean disappearing yourself. That weekend, Emily brought the kids by. They carried a batch of homemade cookies and a hand-drawn card that said, Grandma, we love you. Thank you. When they hugged her, they held tight, not just out of affection, but understanding. Kids were perceptive like that. They could tell when someone had given more than they were supposed to. Linda looked around her cozy home, the soft yellow walls, the new easel in the corner, the stack of novels on her table, and felt something she hadn't in a long time. Freedom. Not the absence of responsibility, but the presence of choice. She hadn't abandoned her family. She had finally returned to herself. And if they wanted to be in her life moving forward, they'd have to meet her there, on her terms, with respect. It wasn't revenge. It was restoration. By late January, the cold had softened, and so had something in Linda's heart. She wasn't naive. Jason still hadn't called. His silence was no longer sharp, just quiet. It was the sound of a grown man being forced to sit with himself. Linda didn't hope for his apology anymore. She didn't need it. Because healing wasn't about changing someone else. It was about choosing peace over resentment, even when you had every right to be angry. One evening, Linda was in her kitchen, chopping vegetables for a soup recipe she hadn't made in years, the kind Jason used to love when he was a boy. Her hands moved with care, and the room was warm, filled with soft jazz playing in the background. Her phone buzzed, a video message from Emily. She opened it, expecting a clip of the grandkids, but instead, it was Emily herself. "Hi, Linda," she said gently. "I just wanted you to know, I've started therapy, real therapy, and I'm not doing it for Jason this time. I'm doing it for me, and for the kids. I want to be the kind of mother you are. Strong, but soft. Loving, but with limits. I never said thank you for showing me that." Linda watched the message twice, not to relive the praise, but to absorb the truth in it. Maybe this was what legacy looked like, not money or mortgage payments, but impact. Not control, but clarity. She walked into the living room and sat by the window. The sunset painted the sky in amber and lilac hues. A year ago, she would have been wiping counters after babysitting, planning her budget around someone else's choices. But now, she just sat, present, whole. That weekend, she invited her neighbor Clara over for tea. Clara was recently widowed, and they talked for hours about loss, about sons, about identity after caregiving. It felt good. No pity, just presence. Later that night, Linda wrote in her journal, "I'm not a mother first. I'm a woman first. And that's not selfish. It's sacred." There was no dramatic reunion, no cinematic moment of Jason showing up with flowers and an apology. But there were quieter victories. Her granddaughter began calling every Wednesday evening just to talk. Emily sent her a framed photo of the kids with a note. "This home will always have room for you." And for the first time in a long time, Linda began planning, not around anyone else's life, but her own. A spring garden, an art class at the community center, maybe even opening a blog for women navigating the loneliness of motherhood's second chapter. She didn't want revenge anymore. She wanted resonance, the kind that echoed in subtle, steady waves, reaching others, maybe even saving them, without ever raising her voice. The pain had been real. So was the betrayal. But so was her choice to rise, not rage. And in that choice, she had become more than a mother, more than a bank account, more than a woman forgotten. She had become something sacred, whole,